Hello and welcome to Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester, where we enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. The tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And that's what we want to do today. Get you fired up. Today's guest is Adam Ward with the company IBM. You can find him online at adammward.com. Adam is based out of the Columbus, Ohio area. He is talking today about combining business expertise with a ministerial role. That's right, you can do both. So today it is Innovating Ministry at Work. So let me tell you a little bit about Adam. Adam, combining a dozen years of automotive R&D experience and over a decade of consulting, Adam is a proven expert when it comes to creating new stuff. He has experience across multiple industries. He has worked for Honda, GE Healthcare, and IBM Watson Health. As the subject matter expert for the firm's innovative consulting arm, Adam has responsibility for keeping them cutting edge. His deep understanding of the customer-patient, new product service introduction, the C-suite business issues, emergent technology trends in both business and clinical environments make him a sought-after voice on developing and executing corporate strategies. Adam regularly speaks at conferences, as well as guest lectures at his MBA alma mater, the Ohio State University Fisher College of Business. He is an avid endurance athlete with 20 Ironman, 70.3 finishes, 3 Ironman finishes, and an Ultraman finish as well. But Adam is also a lifelong Christian. He is a husband, a father. He is an inventor and executive advisor. He's a lay minister. So Adam has had a successful life, but not without its bumps. He has experienced what happens when you get priority right, God first, wife, family second, and career and other things last. Also, when you don't. He married his high school sweetheart in 1993. They are still together and in love, even after experiencing a couple of tough periods. They have 3 adult children who regularly communicate with them. One is married and serving in the Army. The other is studying to be a businessman and entrepreneur. And the other is in ministerial school. Adam has served in multiple ministry roles with a variety of ages. He has worked with youth. He's led college ministry. He's produced and directed plays and videos. He has served on boards and led multi-million-dollar capital campaign and building programs. He is a student of theology and doctrine, and having read multiple seminary books and researched biblical claims. So I bring to you Mr. Adam Ward. Hello, Adam. How are you?
Hello. Good. Great. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks to be on here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for being able to join me today. I love the fact that you are so immersed in both sides of the world, if you will, that you'll be able to give us a really well-rounded opinion on what it's like to be in the world, but not necessarily of the world, to be able to kind of pull from each side and help give us a sense of balance. But before we do that, I do want to ask the question that I ask everyone, and that is, who are you, in your own words, who is Adam Ward?
Well, first, I'm a Christian, and then I'm a husband and father, and then after that, I'm a problem solver and an inventor. And I like to have fun. I like to work hard. And I like to do things for others.
Doing stuff for others, don't you? You really get a kick out of that. I think if that's who you are at your very core, it just brings you such joy to see other people happy as well. I do understand that. Now, what do you do on a day-to-day basis with the Fortune 500 firms that you work with?
Sure. I primarily work with the C-suites of companies that are struggling in their product portfolio. Maybe they've lost some market share, or maybe their profit margin on their products or services aren't doing so well, and really come in with the diverse background that I have and the innovation process that I've created, and allow them to kickstart their transformation around innovation and growth once again, and to win back that market share, introduce new products and services that win, and re-energize their development workforce.
Now, what are some creative things that people could do, or when we're dealing with our C-suite folks, what are some creative things that they could do to really get their team motivated or get their associates a little bit more vested in the plan of the business?
Sure. I think there's a couple of things that we face today in today's world. Number one is the global nature of business and not being able to be co-located in the same office. I think the other thing is a heavy reliance on technology. And when it comes down to it, humans are humans, and we work best when we're with each other face to face and talking and not distracted. And probably one of the biggest things that I can do for firms is get a cross-functional team in a room together without distractions, and go back and use paper and use conversation and create and draw and imagine stuff. And then we'll get to the technology part after that. But that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then I also like to introduce toys, whether it's Legos or modeling clay or 3D figurines, but stuff that you haven't had since you were in grade school, and just have it on the table, and opens that right brain up, and teams can, really do a good job with that.
And it's really interesting that you say that, because isn't it sometimes all about perspective, about being able to kind of shift your paradigm and just see things in a different light, and it really gets those creative juices going? Certainly
does. And it's so easy for us to think that we just have to keep going with what's on the plate today, and it's hard to imagine tomorrow, let alone a year from now or 3 years from now. And pausing to be able to do that and allowing yourself and your team to do that has great dividends.
So once you've introduced this experience to folks, and like you said, it's kind of shaken them up a little bit, but in a good way. It's kind of loosened them up. Where do you go from there? Or have you found that is it hard to get people to change their mind to take this new step that you've introduced to them?
Change is difficult for everyone, and it really has to be on a foundation of what is the reason for change. And I underwent a personal health transformation about 9 years ago when I started doing triathlons, and I was pretty overweight, couldn't run, didn't know how to swim, and I was thinking about my children going into high school, and I wanted to be around for my grandchildren. And I was studying stroke at the time. And I said, I need to get my act together. And that's what caused me to change for the first time in 15 years, to get healthy again. And organizations have to have that same realization. If they see themselves as healthy, as they see themselves as okay, or the status quo works, then they're never gonna stop those French fries, or they're never gonna eat that first apple. And so that's the same thing. And then the second thing, after having that strong reason for action, is a daily and weekly plan to actually accomplish it. And, like I had to start running 1 foot after another, quarter mile, half mile, 1 mile. And then that's the same thing with organizations. When they come up with ideas, they need to start easy and not just jump in and try to do that marathon.
It's so funny that you said that, because that was my next question. Have you been able to find a correlation between being a triathlete and being able to give the people that you work with an example of, yes, it takes hard work and dedication, but there is a payoff?
Yes, actually, I just finished the draft of my first book, Becoming Endurance, and the whole book is about paralleling the innovation process with my life as an endurance athlete. And it talks about how companies can endure for a long time. And, a lot of those disciplines that I discovered in that endurance world absolutely apply to my innovation work on a day-to-day basis.
I can imagine. just the fact that you're called an endurance athlete. That lets people know that this is not for the faint of heart. This is not something that you're just going to get out there and just, run a block and say, woohoo, I did it.
Right.
This is really being dedicated to the cause and pushing yourself as far as you think you could go, plus a little bit more.
Right.
Now, what are some changes that companies seem to kind of push back against? Are there any that you found in particular that are like barriers to keep them from wanting to make this change, even though you've, articulated the importance of the change?
Yeah, the two biggest things I think is, number one is having that leadership buy-in, and really getting people over that hump that they can do it, that it's possible. And a lot of people struggle because they have gotten comfortable in their role and trying something different and getting the leader to buy in. And then once they're bought in, they'll get the employees in line. They do a great job with that. Second thing, and I just wrote a blog post about this, is thinking outside of the box. And, I hear that phrase a lot of times, and I kind of roll my eyes sometimes when I hear it, not because I don't believe in it, but because it can be really hard to come up with ideas that are different, and then once you have them, to actually do them. And if you would have told me that I was going to stop eating McDonald's hamburgers, I would have told you were crazy. And I haven't had one in 8 years now, so it's same thing with changing your daily routine in your business, or moving from paper to a digital transformation, or getting used to using the social media and not typical advertising or promotional routes. It can be challenging, but I've seen a lot of companies do it. I've seen them put creative people in place and reap some pretty good rewards because of it.
So it sounds like there's a little bit of belief that has to go in there, that they believe that the strategy is going to work, have faith that change really is a positive word and not the bad word that people make it out to be, and then just implement those things to get to the end result.
Absolutely. And, it's hard to imagine comfort in the future. But a lot of times I'll try to interweave the pain points that they're dealing with now that can be overcome. And a lot of those pain points we address with the innovation process. And dealing with those, of course, it creates new pain points. Now our phones are so big that it's hard to hold them, but we like the size of the screens. And so at once upon a time, there's a little dinky phone, a little dinky screen, and now they're getting bigger and bigger. And so that, we can leverage the tools that we have at our disposal. We'll get comfortable with them, and now we got to continue to grow. Otherwise, we become irrelevant.
It's so funny that you mentioned the size of the screen on the phone. My son and I were just talking about that the other day. How small the other phones were, and it's like, can you imagine? He's gone from these tiny, and he's a young adult, so a small screen for him means one thing. I remember,
right.
I remember brick phones that we had, and then man, we have a flip phone. Look how modern we are. This is
right.
And now we have tablets and all of these other things, and it's like, wow, technology has really, impacted our lives, and it's made it better for those of us that can utilize it and need it. And you can't imagine your world without it, almost. Even though sometimes we do need to take that step away, that break away, and reconnect with the tangible things that are so important to us, like you said, and get our priorities right, and have that time with God, and have that time with our family. Well, listeners, we need to take a very short break, but don't worry. When we come back, we will continue to speak with Adam Ward. You can find him at AdamMWard.com. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today we are spending time with Adam Ward. He is with a company called IBM as well as dubsgrace.com out of Columbus, Ohio. Now, Adam, I know that you also are a lay minister, and having a lot of ministry experience, I know that kind of is the flip side of the coin for you. So I want to talk a little bit about that. How do you balance your professional work, what you do at the IBMs of the world, and then how do you balance the ministry work of Dubs Grace and make sure that everything kind of stays lined up and doesn't get all crazy?
Yeah, that's an easy question to ask, and it's a harder one to answer, and it's an even harder one to practice. And this is a lot of times when I mentor, younger adults or professionals coming into the world, particularly Christians, I have to remind them that we were called to make disciples. And that doesn't necessarily mean we need to have a full-time ministry position, but that means when we are working full-time that we should be, always ready to share the gospel. But I think it really helps to volunteer time. And so I like to be very intentional about the time that I dedicate towards work and the time that I dedicate towards ministry. If we were to ask our family, our job, our ministry, or our hobbies, how much of the day they would absorb, and all of them would absorb 24 hours. And so, and we have to split that up. And, it would have been very easy for me to, work 80, 100-hour weeks and, make trade-offs and not have my family or not have my ministry. And I've been very successful in the business world and working with some, very large companies and in some really fun roles. But I have had way more happiness, way more peace, way more fulfillment in the ministry roles that I've been a part of. And that only happened because I committed to a ministry, I committed to time to that ministry, and I committed, most importantly, to the people that were involved in that. Mm-hmm. And if we're not intentional about it, just like, my endurance training time, if I'm not putting that training on the schedule, it's not going to get done. Time is the only thing that's equal among everybody, and how we spend it is very important. And if we're going to make disciples, we need to make that a priority as well.
Mm-hmm. I love how you say that it has to be intentional, that it can't be haphazard. It can't just be when I feel like it, but it needs to be intentional. I think that's a really key statement that you've made there.
If we don't make it intentional, it's kind of like giving. Maybe we'll give a little bit, but we won't give the maximum that we can. And if we're committed, if we're faithful, He's faithful too. And I don't know how, but it's like our time gets multiplied. It's really amazing.
Yeah, no, really, I know exactly what you mean. Because when we're doing certain things, and people have said this statement, it's not like I'm creating it, but time flies, and you go, wow, right. What happened to the time? But then when you're doing other things, and I'm not talking about that when you're in class and you're ready for class to be over and, right, it seems like It's been an hour and only 5 minutes has passed by. But there really is this compounding, and not to throw too many scriptures out there, but the one where it says, pressed down, shaken together, running over. It's like our time just becomes running over, and we're able to get so much accomplished. And, right. That kind of leads me to my next question, and that is about 20 years in lay ministry. I, too, have the double digits in ministry, and people ask me all the time, how do you do it? How do you keep that balance? And, you have a husband and you have boys, and which is, football and soccer and all of these things. How do you keep a balance to that? What are what are some stories or some things that you can share about how you have kept that balance with your family, but still been an awesome leader in ministry?
Yeah, I tell you, with 3 adult children now, one of the things that, that my wife and I pray for all the time is that they would surround themselves with godly people, that the friends that they make, that the positions that they take, they would have godly people around them. And I think that's probably one of the biggest things about the ministry piece is when my wife and I were doing things together, our kids were always around people who spoke the same things that we did, talked about the same things we did, and had the same positions on morality, of course, a biblical worldview. And I'd never want to take a ministry position that isolated my wife or isolated my children, and I wanted to make sure that they were part of it. And I didn't mean I was teaching their Sunday school class, but when we were working with youth, they got to take advantage of the play stuff that we had there, when their services were over, or we got to go on trips together and, see different things, or when they were in their, quiz meets, for Bible class that we were there, cheering them on. And just making sure that they were plugged in as much as I was plugged in, and that was all under the same umbrella, and we weren't just off doing our own thing.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if people understand how important it is to have your children be a part of what you're doing. Not to the point where it becomes a job for them, but it's okay for them to have fun and be exposed to all of your ministry work, but at the same time just having them around you. I did the same thing. My oldest son has been with me. He has traveled with me. He has, gotten an opportunity to meet and greet with other folks as he has gotten older. And there are such wonderful stories that he can tell about my visiting other ministries that I don't even have, because they're his experiences. And he's able to take that story and tell other people his age and say, hey, it can be fun. It can be something that you want to include in your day-to-day, that, being a Christian can also be cool and fun. And just because our parents work in ministry, it doesn't mean that we're these weird kind of folks,
Right.
Especially for our teens, because sometimes if they go through a totally different experiences than we do sometimes,
They do,
so
certainly.
It makes it quite interesting for them as well. So what are some things that, if someone is really thinking about going into ministry at any particular level, that they're thinking about maybe becoming a youth pastor or the youth leader, or they just want to step up in ministry, what are some suggestions that you would give them on how to prepare themselves for this new page in their lives?
Sure. I had the fortune to grow up in the church and be around a lot of different training programs, and I learned a lot. Went to Baptist school growing up, and then as an adult had to find out, okay, well, what's true and what's not true. And so I went back to basics, studied some some theology books to make sure that what my teachers had told at the time was actually accurate. And turns out a lot of those things weren't accurate, and I'm sure it was not intentional. I'm sure it was passed down. But when you're in that role of a teacher, whether it's a 5-year-old, whether it's a 15-year-old, whether it's a 55-year-old, to make sure that you have a solid theological base, and that you are accountable to to some type of position, and that you're not just changing all the time. So I think it's good for anyone, to get immersed in the Scripture, but then also to maybe read a basic book on theology or foundational beliefs for your denomination, or one that you can relate to. And I think doing that, and then starting to get some of the base practices. If I wasn't in the Bible every day and praying every day when I'm doing active touching ministry. It was really easy for me to get off kilter, become someone I didn't want to be, offer bad advice. And so really have those base practical, base principles down and those base activities down.
Mm. Well, I know that with people being all different denominations and at different stages of their faith, what would you say are some things that the church needs to do today to just ensure that we are reaching the next generation, that not only are we maintaining, the congregants that we have, but that we're reaching the next generation?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough question. A lot of people ask that, and it's easy for pastors to get comfortable with the congregation that they have. And one of the things is we typically in the Christian world view two segments. We view the unsaved and we view the saved. And we have to view everyone along a spectrum from completely lost to eventually we'll be righteous with God in heaven. And each one of those stages requires a different level of teaching, a different level of accompaniment. And I think, Galatians 5, 19 to 23 talks about, what are the actions of the flesh and what are the actions when you're filled with the Spirit. And if we can use that as a continuum and realize that there's probably an infinite number of segments and that we can design ministries for each one of those specific segments, that we will be far more effective in reaching the lost than just treating them like, oh, they're saved or they're not saved.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, that is a really powerful statement there, that everyone, we need to be able to reach people where they are, but also be able to take them where they need to go and be prepared for all sides of that. That is, wow, I know someone else just went, aha, that's what we need to do. That is, but it's amazing how sometimes the answer is so simple and it's right there in front of you, but you tend to overlook it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost because it is so simple, or you've forgotten that you know what the answer is because you've been doing things a certain way for so long that you kind of just get stuck in the complacency of being on autopilot.
Right. And, I think one of the most intimidating things is actually going to a church for the first time. And, once you've been in for 6 months, 12 months, that's your community. But think about that 1, 2, 3 week experience and how important it is from that parking lot to that seat and back out to that parking lot. And it takes just as much ministry there as it does from that preacher on the stage sharing that message, to make sure those people are welcome and to connect them and plug them in.
That is so incredibly true, and I'm going to take a moment to kind of quickly share my experience when you say, from the parking lot to the pew and from the pew back to the parking lot. When I first moved to California and finding a church home in Long Beach was really important to me. And you hit the nail on the head. How do we greet that new person when they walk in the door? Do we act like there's someone important to us, that we're happy that they're here visiting with us, or are they just another person, just another, like just another number?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the church that we ended up going to, it's funny, my children and myself, we felt like that was home, and we didn't have to convince each other.
Right.
At the end, and when we went back home, and I said, so what did you think? It was unanimous. It was like, I loved it. I think I said, let's go back next week. And by the time we did a month, we knew, okay, this is the place that we will be attending. Yeah,
right.
And it was it, and that is so important. Well, listeners, we need to take a very short break. But Adam, if you could please, and I want to make sure that people can reach you. What are the best ways for someone to reach you on the internet?
Sure. I'm okay with people emailing me directly, AdamMWard@yahoo.com, or you can find my website, adammward.com, and I'm on Twitter at ADZ_MIKL. That's ADZ_MIKL. Of course, Dubs Grace as well.
Alrighty, listeners, we need to take our break. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I'm your host, Dr. Angela Chester. Today, we are speaking with Adam Ward. He is with a company called IBM, but you can also find him on adammward.com as well as Dubs Grace. That's DUBS Grace.com. We're talking innovative ministry and how we can combine business expertise with our ministerial roles as well. Well, I'm going to kind of shift gears a little bit with you, Adam, and we're going to talk about church as a business. Now, I know that most people don't think business and then church, but there very much is a business side to church. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I work with a lot of nonprofit organizations, of course churches, but also healthcare and hospital. And one of the things is if we have no money, we have no mission. And it requires funds to keep us going. A lot of pastors all here say, I was going to business school and God called me into ministry. And I'm like, you're in business. If we don't make money here, we can't pay for the buildings, we can't pay for the staff, we can't pay for the materials, we can't fund missionaries. So we're running a P&L, as a ministry. Now, the nice thing is that we do get the tax exemption status as being a ministry, but then that means we have to deliver on the ministry side as well. And I think it's easy for boards to focus on one or the other, but really we have to make sure that we're blending both of them, that we're being good stewards of our finances, but at the same time that we're demonstrating faith and allowing God to move through the spiritual gifts that He's given us.
I like how you said that we have to balance the board and the spirituality of it all. Can you kind of touch on that just a little bit more?
I've seen probably just as many fights in the boardroom, not fights, but arguments in the boardroom over dollars, as well as bad behaviors that we've seen in the congregation. And it's easy for boards to spend so much time, looking at the money, looking at where we're spending stuff. And I really like to challenge boards to spend time praying with their pastors and, spend time getting deeper themselves in God and closer to Him, and being used not just in that boardroom, but in ministry roles, and advancing people on their discipleship curve.
It really is important. Listeners, let me tell you, we have to cover our pastors, we have to cover our church leaders, be it that they're our deacons, the elders, members of session, the board members. We really need to make sure that we are covering them in prayer, and that, like Adam said, that they don't get caught up just in the business side of it all, that they remember that there's a bigger purpose, there's a bigger cause here, and to keep that balance. I know that that's something that I personally do, and I don't take it just haphazardly. I really and truly spend time in prayer and say, Lord, guide them and, give them that wisdom and open their eyes and allow their ears to hear what they really need to do and be and say, and just make sure that the church can continue to prosper and do the things that need to be done. With that being said, I wanted to ask you about the experiences when it comes to the spiritual experiences of individuals and being able to really expound on that. I know that there's some powerful moments in ministry, even though we have to deal with the business side of it. How does that play into the larger picture?
Well, I think, first of all, I've had a lot of fun in ministry, being an innovator, taking my business skills and pulling in an environment that doesn't usually have, that skill set. And I've run formal sessions and designed stuff from 3 people up to 4,000 people. And, it's amazing that you can create the fertile grounds that people can experience God as deeply with 3 as they can with 4,000. And I think, if we look at the Bible and we look at, preparing ourselves, repenting, seeking Him, getting out of our comfort zone, believing that He's there, and just being abandoned and then being still, that every time He's going to be faithful and He's going to be there. And I tell you, if heaven's anything like that, that moment where you just feel God's presence around you, then we will never want it to end. Unfortunately, it won't never end. But we can taste that here on earth, and I've led groups in all ages into that, and it's life-changing for everyone. It's just absolutely the most powerful thing they've ever experienced.
Mm-hmm. It really is, and it's something that you never forget, no matter how old you are. Everyone is able to talk about that moment. They may call it different things. They may have similar experiences or totally different experiences, but that moment that you really have that spiritual connection, mind-blowing. You just don't forget it. That is so true. And I think that that's really important for especially our younger generation to be able to have an environment that allows them the freedom to just relax and to be themselves and not feel that they're being judged, and that they can allow Holy Spirit to just work and be around them, and they can accept it and just freely go, wow, so this is what you guys have been talking about.
Right.
So when we talk about innovating ministry, and we talk about the Christianity of today, what does that mean to you, and how do you explain that when you are speaking to ministries?
Yeah, I think our message never changes. The gospel never changes. God never changes. But if we hold that in place, and whether that's a parable that Jesus is teaching, whether that's stained glass on the Middle Ages of windows of castles and churches, or if it's video screens today, that we have to understand that what was relevant yesterday is not going to be relevant tomorrow, but the message will always be relevant. So we have to move past tradition, and we really need to embrace love. And especially as fractured as we are now, and the opportunity, say they'll know. Jesus said they'll know they're my disciples because of their love for each other. And he also, we have to be as wise as snakes, but as gentle as doves. And there's just so many ways to try new ways to deliver the gospel, and we should be searching for those.
And that's why I love how technology has been able to advance getting the message out, that we may not be able to touch the person personally, like they may not be locally, but we're able to reach thousands, millions of people thanks to this beautiful thing called technology. The internet has really opened that up, and if those of us that are in ministry, however we're in ministry, we're able to share this beautiful gospel and to touch other people's lives in such a positive way. So what are some things that you're excited about moving forward in taking the message that you have and getting it out there to people?
Yeah, that's actually, this builds perfectly on that last question. Part of the thing I'm most excited about is this thing that we're calling What If It Was True, or WIIWT, What If It Was True. And we're creating a series of 15 to 30-second videos that have the gospel synopsis just in one quick shot. So it talks about an imperfect world. Jesus came to forgive our sins. He died. He was resurrected, and he's in heaven so we can spend eternity with him. But we're doing the videos for all different segments. So we're actually targeting about 10 to 15 different segments to start. And our goal is to share the gospel right now, to focus on it with all 2.4 million people in the Columbus, Ohio area, and to get that message out there. So, we have a new generation of people that have never heard the gospel. We have a ton of immigrants that are here. We have a ton of, the first generation outside of the church, that are growing up. And we don't know if they've even heard the gospel in the United States. And so that's something that we're really excited about launching here in the next couple of months, and getting that message short and simple out there, and then pointing them to churches and resources where they can grow after that.
That's awesome. Now, did you say that there was a particular age range that it's targeted for, or is this something for everyone?
We will have links in the appropriate areas for different people. So we'll probably start on the young side, maybe 5th grade, and then we'll go up to retired age in the different segments and different media types.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is definitely something to be excited about. It sounds really, really awesome. And, I love when people, what I call, live in their purpose, and they do exactly what they're supposed to do, because it has such a powerful impact on those around them, that we can be these dual people. And what I mean by that is that we can have a ministry job and a non-ministry job and still have such an awesome impact on people that are still touched by the various ministries in which we work.
That's right.
That is so awesome. Go ahead.
No, I think that you summarized it excellently. And if we are purposeful with our lives and we obey Matthew 28:19 and 20 and making disciples, and as well as providing for our family, that we can have amazing lives, and people will feel extremely fulfilled.
Now, I want to kind of shift gears just a little bit, and I know we only have a few minutes left with you, but I like for people to always know that they can be balanced in everything that they do. And I know that as a married person that has, that's working in both aspects, if there's some young man out there or a young couple that is getting involved in ministry and they're having a hard time figuring out how to be balanced, what are some suggestions that you would give as far as how to keep your marriage important, how to keep God first? Because work's going to come. You're going to figure out how to do the work stuff. But how do you really keep the personal balance in place?
Yeah, and I think besides being a Christian, once we get married, that becomes our primary responsibility, and we can't put ministry in place of marriage. And Paul says, "I wish that you were single, and if you weren't, get married." So the number one thing that I always recommend to couples is read Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages. It talks about the 5 different ways that people feel loved, and your spouse will have 1 or 2 that are very important to him or her. And if you're focusing on those, then you'll keep that love tank full. And whether it's quality time or acts of service or gifts or physical touch, that you will be providing the emotional support that they need. So if you have a husband that's quality time and you're not spending time with them, and ministry this and running the kids there, he's not going to feel loved. If it's acts of service and you're not making dinner, or you're not helping him get his stuff ready, or whatever it is, or vice versa. Husbands, it's so easy to get immersed in the job, to think it's the wife's role to take care of the house. It's our job as a couple to take care of life together. Now, I do ironing, I do shopping, I do cooking, I do everything that I can to help my wife, and she does everything she can to help me. It's not us, me versus her. It's not her versus me. What is our love languages? How do we work well together? And we pray every day together, and if those who pray together, that's the number one statistic for not getting divorced is those who pray together. So that was a lot in a short time, but That's my advice.
No, that was perfect. That was absolutely perfect. That it is so important. Just spend time with each other and understand each other and be able to speak each other's language so that the communication is there, that the love stays there. No, that was absolutely a perfect answer. Best advice ever. I'm telling you guys, if you're sitting there going, read the book. Read the book. It really and truly can make a difference. Adam, thank you so much for visiting with me again today. And I want to make sure, just in case someone came in a little bit later in the show, how do they get in contact with you if they want to speak with you or invite you? What's the best way to get to you?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Angela. This has been a great experience. They can reach me at AdamMWard, that's 2M's.com, or DubsGrace, D-U-B-S, grace.com. And they have contact links on both of those websites to get a hold of me.
Thank you, listeners, for joining me as well. And may you continue to find the grace and mercy in all that God does. And may his face continue to shine upon you. Until next time, be awesome, everyone. Bye-bye.